everybody? Artistry and Finesse with you on Monday night. The Bachelor. What are we? Is this The Bachelor or The Bachelorette?
Bachelorette.
The Bachelorette finale. And let me tell you, we've been doing this a long time. How many years now?
Several years. It's not an overestimate to say that we've done this for several years.
We've been through all of the emotions. We've seen a lot of ups and downs on this podcast.
We've had our own ups and downs.
Our wounds have been out there raw for everyone to see. We've healed, and then we've been wounded again. But this is something different.
What do you mean by that? Explain.
Oh, I think that for the first time, we've seen a woman who clearly loved a man, made us think she loved another man very much, only to prove once and for all that she loved the first man. And I think that that's special.
I want to ask you a hard question, though. I want to start just like Dez's brother and get into the hard questions right off the bat. Do you, in your heart of hearts, and I come to you knowing that you have more experience in this than I do, you yourself are married, I'm not married, you yourself are a father, I'm not a father, and that's why I come to you to ask this question. Is Dez's love for Chris genuine?
Well, with the caveat that at the beginning of the podcast I forgot what show this was, I will tell you that I think she thinks it's genuine. I believe that she's genuine in saying that she loves him, but I think it's an open question just how changeable Dez's love truly is.
But see, you can think that you're, the Queen of England, but if you're not the Queen of England and you think you're the Queen of England, you go to a mental institution.
Right. It's a little difficult to pull it off.
So her brother was asking her, he said, is your love for Chris, is it sincere? And she said yes. And he said, do you think that Chris's love is for you is sincere? And she said yes. But there was no discussion of whether it was genuine. And I don't know that I'm comfortable with two people ending up together if I don't know that their love for each other is genuine. If it's just sincere, okay, that's fine. You can date somebody. But I need it to be genuine.
So, some people might say, what's wrong with you? Those are synonyms, but not on this show.
No, we don't use language accidentally on this show. Everything we say and everything they say is purposeful, it's deliberate, and I think it reveals a lot about the character of these two people, that their love is sincere, not genuine.
Right. Like, take a look at the hierarchy of blessings if you don't know what we're talking about. If you say, I approve of you, is that the same as getting a blessing? No, it isn't. If the dad says, yes, you have my permission, is that a blessing? Yes, it is. You need to know the difference.
It's a blessing, but then once you get the blessing, there are different degrees of the blessing. And if you look at the book and you look at the hierarchy of blessings, then you know that permission is a blessing, but is it as good as the blessing? No.
Right. I mean, the best thing that could happen to you is for the father to put his hands on your head and say, you have the blessing.
Like, sit you down like
Wait a minute.
Like
the best thing that could have happened is for Chris's dad to appear, give you the nasal specific, and say you have the blessing.
Well, I mean, I think you're almost at the point where, like, what we need to have happen blessing-wise is for an Englishman to be the Bachelor. And and he goes and asks for to be a contestant, and he goes and asks the Bachelorette's father for his blessing. And he comes out in, like, full regalia with the sword and, like, taps it on each shoulder and, like, bequeaths the blessing upon. I mean, permission, and I'm looking this up right now.
Right.
Permission, it's just not the blessing. It's a blessing, not the blessing. So, if we start there, like Dez's family, I think, kind of bought into Chris, and it was good that they approved of him. But
yeah, but it was like the whole courtship. It was merely acceptable. It wasn't effusive. It was like Dez was basically resolving to herself that he was acceptable, that she was going to give him permission to court her. But it wasn't over the top blind love like she had for Brooks.
No, it was a little timid, it was a little tepid, a little reserved. And I think that's why when you look at a couple like Sean and Catherine who showed up earlier in the episode, they I was a little skeptical about them from the beginning, and to be honest with you, I still am. I did not like what I saw between the two of them tonight. I thought Sean was very forced.
They could break up on Dancing with the Stars.
I don't watch Dancing with the Stars. It doesn't do it for me. I pretend that the show's over when the show's over. Yeah. So I'm not familiar with what you're talking about. But I think that as much as Chris seemed to come on so strong in the last hour of this episode, and it really was like a total. It wasn't a.
Wait a minute, Brooks coming out. It's Brooks after the final rose.
I see. It looks like he's had a hair situation.
Do you have volume right now?
No, I muted it on purpose. I don't need to. I don't need to hear it when I can feel it. I can feel what's happening.
Yeah, I can see what's happening up there. You know what I'd like to see just once? I'd like for somebody's dad to be like, come out with a sword and a stone, like Excalibur, and be like, all right, you want the blessing? Pull out the sword.
Right. Make him chop the stone in half with the sword.
Right. Or like Thor's hammer. You want the blessing? Pick up that hammer.
So we've recapped the blessing. I think everybody understands where we are when it comes to the blessing. I don't think there's there's no lack of clarity.
All right. Well, let's start.
Let's go through the episode. Yeah, let's go through the episode.
A lot happened. I thought that Harrison, maybe if you put together a Harrison highlight reel, wouldn't the first clip have to be when he says to Dez, "Are you okay?" "You're not." And then she bursts into tears.
Just immediate wailing and weeping.
He just took her walls and it was like an absolute decimation.
Well, it's not surprising to me because we talked about this last week, and unfortunately you didn't see the episode last week, but Harrison was in his just rarest form last week. I mean, he's at the point, like he's sort of in the later half of his career hosting this, but I look at him like a 1997 Michael Jordan. Right. Like, he's still the best player. He's still the best guy in the game. He doesn't have quite the athleticism he had before, but he gets by with moxie and guile.
Right. It's like 2001 Mario Lemieux.
Right. Just so, like, it's got the combination of the athleticism and the savviness just sort of reaches its peak. Right. That's where he is right now. And
he's playing chess out
that clip was really just a continuation of the previous week. So I'm not surprised. It's not like he had a reset from that, from with the performance he put on last week. It was just like they hadn't given us that footage yet. And then when he came out in the rose ceremony, and he said to the gentleman, he said, "Brooks is not with us." I mean, he presented it as if Brooks had actually died.
Right.
On the previous day. Like,
lost it.
Brooks has succumbed to his 2-day battle with cancer, and he's no longer with us. Like, what? I mean, it was just unbelievable.
Right. It was time to let go. He was amazing, and then.
But before we get off him, how about the way he handles the studio audience?
So deftly.
I mean,
so
first
adroit.
of all, who are these people?
I don't know, but I do know that Mrs. Artistry would be right at home in that audience. I mean, her emotions tonight just absolutely paralleled that audience. I think that, they found I don't believe that they just let anyone into that audience. I think they screen these women carefully. They want to know that they're there for the right reasons. And I think that their screening, I think, for the studio audience is probably better than it is for the actual show.
Do you think that if Mrs. Artistry went to the studio audience and she was allowed to bring a guest, do you think that she would bring you with her?
No, I don't. I think I aggravated her during the show. I think it annoyed her that we were doing this podcast. She went upstairs. She couldn't tolerate it. But, I respect that. I respect where she's coming from. She's having a different kind of a journey than I am. But I think that, when you look at the studio audience and what could sort of enhance the experience for everyone, I think you and I being there would do just that. I mean, it would sort of like we would be the prism through which the audience could relate to the other people in the audience. I think we could serve a really important function. You're laughing. I'm completely serious.
It's funny you mention that because there was at one point, and this is my only beef with Chris Harrison, is that at one point he said about one of the women in the audience who was asking questions, he said that she spoke for all of Bachelor Nation. And I was saying to myself, no, she doesn't. We do. Like, that's what we're doing right now. We're speaking for everybody. And I thought that was, I think that we need to sort of be there as a counterbalance to kind of give, people, a lot of these people in the crowd, they think they know what they're feeling, but really they don't. And I think it's our job to get in there and tell them what they're feeling. So, when Chris comes down the aisle and he picks a person in and he says, are you on Team Chris or are you on Team Drew? What I want to do is come down from the row above and say, excuse me, she's on Team Drew. And she's like, no, I like Chris. And I say, no, ma'am, you're on Team Drew.
Yeah, I think the problem is these people they're on the ground. They're the troops on the ground. They only can see what's right in front of them. They see the emotions that they're feeling right now. We are like surveilling the situation from high in the sky. We see the entire emotional journey. We're not fixated on one point in the journey. We see the progression. We see where we've been. We see where we're going. And I think that that's a unique perspective.
Well, a lot of people think they can see the forest through the trees. I think what we do is we see the journey through the experience.
And we see the tree falling.
we see the tree falling on the 12-year-old girl, and we know what that means. Like, we know when we hear something like that, that is walls down. That is victory.
Let me remind you again that I forgot what show this was. Let's go through the episode a little bit.
Yeah, details.
Yeah, let's talk about Drew's date. I mean, Drew, the poor guy, it was like the first interaction between Drew and Des. She's saying, like, what have you been doing? Have you been swimming? Have you been hanging out in the sun? He's like, no, I've just been, like, etching your name into the wall. I've been, like, whittling a heart out of wood. It's just like, it's too much, man. You just got to, like, take a step back.
What I thought was really interesting was that they rode horses to the beach.
Yeah.
And if you recall from the preview that we did like 10 weeks ago now, there was another gentleman who said his favorite thing to do was take horses to the beach. And you'll never remember who this person is. I guarantee. I had to look him up. Jogo.
I don't know. Jogo?
Jogo with a D. The short guy. He was eliminated the first night when Des had her height-ism, and she sent home everybody.
I remember. Yeah.
That little guy would have been able to overcome what Drew wasn't able to overcome. But I thought that on balance, I mean, I'm going to take an unpopular position here. I think I'm going to call BS on Drew and Des because I think both of them were showing fake emotion. I don't think that Dez's tears were real. And I think that Drew, once he got to a certain point in this season, he flipped a switch and just went full Bachelor audition mode. And once you are there for those reasons and not the right reasons, that's why you don't get the rose.
Yeah, his pain didn't seem authentic to me. It seemed rehearsed. It seemed mechanical, and it's particularly hard to believe. He doesn't strike me as a stupid guy. He may be emotionally stunted in some way, but for him to endure like a really awkward walk and horse ride on the beach with Des, and then when she asks him how he's doing, to respond, how else would I be doing? I'm madly in love. It just seems like at that moment, if you're real, you would turn to the person and say, okay, talk to me. What's going on? But that's not what Drew did.
No.
Definite Bachelor audition.
I think if we're going to make a sports analogy for Drew, and I think that's what people are wanting, I look at him a lot like a Dwight Howard. Like he's got all the tools. Like he's a very athletic, physically impressive man. But when it comes to like the emotional connection, he's like Dwight Howard at the free throw line. It's just brick after brick after brick. He's so rigid. He's so tense. And it's like, dude, you got to just lighten up a little bit. And he's so like mechanical. And it's just, who would have fun being married to Drew? What would the enjoyment be of being married to Drew, other than that you'd take nice family Christmas cards, pictures?
I believe you're the one that just said he was physically impressive. So maybe you could speak to that.
Well, I'm not saying that. I've had people tell me that. Physical beauty is not something I'm concerned with. I'm concerned with what's inside, not outside. I've just been told by other people that they think he's physically impressive. And Chris Harrison said it tonight.
You brought this up last week, and I just want to put this issue to bed. Is it Antigua or Antigua?
I'm an Antigua guy myself.
I think it's a fact that it's Antigua.
I mean,
I'm not sure what any of these people are talking about.
Would I go to Antigua and call an Antiguan Antigua in his face? I can't say that I would do that. I think there's a lot of parallels here with like the Redskins name. It's like sort of just something that everybody accepts, but there's, whether you'd use it in certain contexts,
you might want to scrutinize it a bit more.
Right. Yeah. I think you got to be a little more careful. So I can't say what I would do if I was in Antigua. What I can say is that here on this podcast from my apartment, I'm very comfortable calling it Antigua.
Yeah, I think that's right. So Drew is abruptly dismissed. And I think we both think that...
Deserved. He had to go.
Yeah. Well deserved, and what happened after the dismissal seemed very fake all the way around. And then Chris shows up, and in its own way, it was just as bizarre that, 24 hours after Brooks went home?
Roughly.
Couldn't have been long, right? She's thrilled to be with Chris, and everything's great. And she's talking about, I was writing my notes. I think at one point she said there were undeniable sparks, and my iPhone auto-corrected that to read undeniable dorks.
Yeah, there's something to that.
I think there is.
But go ahead.
Yeah, did you have the same feeling that there was something inauthentic about this?
I think it was forced all along. Not on Chris's part. I like Chris. I think Chris, he was genuine. I think Des was sort of feeling the emotional upheaval from Brooks still. And she was kind of looking for that rock. And Chris kept telling her, I'll be that rock. I'll be that rock. But again, if I'm being skeptical and trying to really evaluate this, where was Chris last week? That's when she needed a rock, and he wasn't there. And again, he keeps talking this good game about he'll always be there. Like when they're at the rose ceremony, he says, she's crying, and then he comes to her later and he says, I wish I could have gone up and and given you consolation.
Show, don't tell.
Yeah, go up and give her consolation. What are you doing? He says, out of respect for Drew. I don't respect Drew. You don't respect Drew. If we were on that show and we are in love with Des and Des is crying.
We would not respect Drew.
Look, here's what we do. We take Drew, we take the whole palm of our hand on Drew's face and we just push him aside and say, get out of my way.
Push him right into the ocean.
Yeah, push him in the ocean. Who cares about Drew? If you're there for the right reasons are Des. They're not Drew. And so that's the only problem I have with Chris. Otherwise, I think he's great. I just don't think that he knows how to protect Dez's heart.
Yeah, you need to act. Stop talking and act. You know, it's funny because there was one scene that really drives this point home where they're having a really long conversation about their relationship, where it's been, where it's going. It was like Chris says, you know, it's like we pick up where we left off, and Des says it's good. Chris says, it is that way. And Des says, it just keeps moving forward. We're just moving in the right direction. It does. It's good. It is. It's so important. Yes, we're moving forward. and on like that. It's like at some point you have to understand that you're just describing something good. You're not experiencing something good.
Well, there's a lot of narrating the present that's going on. And that's really the fallback for this show, and that's kind of the rhetoric you have to have your guard up for when you hear it. It's like it's the I'm glad you're here that we talked about last week. It doesn't mean anything. It's just saying what you feel at that moment. It doesn't mean where you're going forward. It's not commenting on the whole relationship. And so when they sit there and they say it is yes, okay, good, yes, fine. I'm with you on that. I think that you have to look beyond that.
You have to. And typically we have that kind of a conversation between two people that are heading towards an ultimate union. But you can read what's going on beneath the surface, and it's the connection on other levels that you really have to pay attention to. But here, they clearly didn't have that. She just had the connection with Brooks. This, to me, was all talk. All talk.
Now,
Des talking.
Are you
talking
saying
yourself into this?
Are you saying that she can't have connection with more than one person?
I'm saying that she's talking herself into this connection, and it's not that she didn't feel it at that time. She's talking to Drew now. On after
I just looked up and saw. Is he? How skinny is his tie? That'll tell me whether he's really in the running for the Bachelor.
Not as skinny as Chris's tie.
No. I'm looking at their faces. It just seems forced to me. I just don't see it. I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it either. In any event, it goes back to what we were saying before. It's not that Des wasn't feeling a connection to Chris at that particular time, but she was ignoring what just happened on her journey and what I suspect will happen down the road in her journey. I just don't know that this is built to last. I really don't.
No, I don't have my money on it. Although I do want to say one thing about Chris that impressed me the most and kind of threw me off guard and made me question some of the things that I believe in. Now, we've seen this move a million times. You get down to the final two and you can't hold back. You got to pull out all the stops, right? Mm-hmm. So the safe move in his situation is to go scrapbook. He
didn't do that.
Give Des a scrapbook of all the pictures, of all the good times you've had together. I mean, I think there was one time later he's talking about, we were in Madeira and we took that boat to that deserted island. Like, that's a time, you get pictures of that. You put that in the scrapbook. He went journal, not scrapbook. And I thought, that's a really interesting play because it sort of puts the onus on her to fill up the journal. And he's saying to her, give me your love. Put your love in this journal rather than me just dump all of my love in this scrapbook and give it to you. What are your thoughts?
Well, yes and no. He did put all of his poems in there, but I feel like that's a serious overrating of his poems. It's like sort of saying to her, my poems are timeless. They should be with us forever. and so you will now have them in your journal, this little book of poetry. But I'm not sure that his poems quite rise to that level. You might want to cycle through a few drafts, perhaps get some constructive criticism from others, refine them a little bit, then maybe ultimately the very best of them make it into a journal. But he's just throwing all those things into the journal, including, girls I thought were true, now they're gone, and here are you. Yeah. And I'm just not sure that makes my final journal.
Okay, but that was at the back of the journal. Which right. I think everybody would agree that the back of a journal is the least important part of a journal. It's what goes on in those first couple pages that's most important. And that was an open book. And I thought that it was very symbolic that he said to her, you write our future. You know how I feel. You fill in the blanks.
Right. Unless they're doing it in Hebrew, in which case, front of the journal, his poems.
Well, I think that's a real concern. I think that if he's Jewish and Des converts to Judaism and they start reading right to left, and she's going to have
you don't know how they're going to raise their kids.
She's going to have to cross out one of his poems, and what we don't know about Chris is whether he has a temper. And tempers can be fatal to bachelor-bachelorette relationships.
Yeah, we've seen that too many times.
Yeah, we're not going to get burned by a bad temper again.
So do you think that Drew's efforts will pay off and he will be the next Bachelor? I think we're going to find out on this show. After the final rose.
Yeah, I think he will. I actually do think he's going to be the next Bachelor.
I said to Mrs. Artistry that he's such a tool. He may be physically attractive, but it's hard for me to imagine. She pointed out that he is but one in a long line of Bachelor tools. He probably would be quite suitable in that regard.
Right. I don't know, though. I just, I want someone you can work with who's sort of moldable, who's like Play-Doh emotionally. And I don't see it with him.
I'd like to see Dez's brother as a sort of sneaky candidate. I mean, I really think there was some sensitivity there that we saw and some perceptiveness that really no one else on the show displayed.
I think the siblings are sort of the most underutilized aspect of this show. You got Brad Womack's brother, who's a very handsome man. He should have been the Bachelor. You got Ashley's crazy sister with the tattoos. She should have been the Bachelorette. And you put her on a show with Dez's brother with the tattoos, and now you're talking. Now you got a season.
I think the Womacks could be like the Bush family of The Bachelor.
Yeah, it's generational. They fight harder against the estate tax than anybody.
Right. Brad's brother is like, why should my brother get all the glory? Why can't I be president?
Why should the government get 50% of my love?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of good candidates.
It's an endless supply. I mean, whether it's Drew, whether it's Brooks, whether it's Chris, it doesn't really matter. We'll be here for The Bachelor.
So where do you rank this season?
What am I ranking it against? Other seasons or just
other seasons? I mean, it was emotional. There was a lot going on here. There were a lot of twists. Didn't necessarily see this one coming. I think Reality Steve got this wrong. Mrs. Artistry was telling me.
Good.
I think
good.
Yeah, it's great. Reality Steve, I think, predicted that Brooks would end up with Des, so it's wonderful to see that. It was an unpredictable season as far as they go.
It was, and I give it credit for that, but what I don't think you have, and as much as I like Des and I do like Chris, I don't think you have sort of that iconic figure in this season. You don't have an Emily Maynard. You don't have a little Ricky. You don't have a Brad Womack. And you definitely don't have a Roberto. And I think that's sort of what's missing from this season.
Nobody's ending up on Mount Rushmore is what you're telling me.
Right.
Who's on your Mount Rushmore? Four names. Give me four names. At this
point, I would have to go Brad Womack, Roberto, Emily, and little Ricky. I mean, how would you leave Little Ricky off of Mount Rushmore? Who has had more influence over what's happened on this show than Little Ricky?
I think you're right. And if she does become, as we have long hoped, the first, second generation Bachelorette, then she wouldn't even be on Mount Rushmore. She'd be above Mount Rushmore. And
I'll leave you with this thought: who's going to carve the Mount Rushmore? Ames Brown.
So well said. So well spoken. Well, everybody, it's been quite a journey. And I see that Chris has just come out, embraced Des, is giving her a loving, tender kiss. And what better way to end? Thanks for sharing this with us, and we hope you'll join us next season. Until then, the Big Kibitz.
Time to kibitz, time to kibitz, time to kibitz. It's the big kibitz. Come and kibitz with the big kibitz. Ooh, big kibitz. Big. It's the big kibitz. Come and kibitz with the big kibitz. Ooh, big kibitz.